Coming up in this week's Eredivisie review, a potentially challenging week for the top three, with Ajax facing one of just two sides to beat them so far. AZ hosting Feyenoord and PSV visiting a Groningen side with a strong home record. The bottom three had winnable-looking games, but were running out of time to secure the points they needed to make up ground. All the action from all 9 games on the way in the next hour. We kick off in Heerenveen with two sides heading in opposite directions. Despite recording just one win since the start of February, Heerenveen have been on an upwards trajectory in a congested mid-table where even a string of draws could lift a side into the top 10. Their Moldovan striker, Jon Niculescu, had the first opportunity against Willem II, who've been dropping like a stone. 5 straight defeats and a 10-game winless run have seen the Tilburgers land in the relegation playoff place, third from bottom, with a 6-point gap to safety. And the home side broke through them at will in the opening 10 minutes, with only a brilliant bit of defensive work from Jesse Bosch preventing a goal, something their coach Peter Maas was quick to praise. The Belgian himself was getting a lot of praise not so long ago, having overseen their promotion back to the Eredivisie and a decent start, which had them riding high in the top half before Christmas. But they've taken just 2 points this year and were lucky not to concede from any of these Heerenveen opportunities, Niculescu wasting this. He made amends shortly after, when Ringo Mervelds lost the ball in midfield and didn't get the free kick that he was hoping for. Without a league goal this year, Niculescu did at least score in Moldova's World Cup qualifier with Estonia. And here, he owed a debt to Luc Brouwers, who did all the groundwork, leaving him with a simple finish. A reward for their enterprising start. New coach Robin Veldman had lost his opening match in charge at Utrecht last week, but there were positive signs. And those had clearly been built on in the days since. The 6th league goal of the season for the striker, who was starting a league game for the first time since the end of November. The visiting response took time to materialise afterwards, but midway through the half, they could easily have been 11. Rafael Bahunek cutting the ball back for Patrick Joosten. He's approaching his 50th appearance for the club, but has so far only scored once in January's heavy defeat at FC Twente. Bahunek was also involved in the game's next chance, although at the other end this time. His header didn't achieve what he'd wanted to, and only presented the ball to Mats Kuller. Great technique from the German fullback, a decent save too from Thomas Didion Erdel, who'd already had a busy opening half hour. That proved the precursor to another goal which stemmed from the resulting corner. Again, Kuller played his part with the ball in, and defender Sam Kirsten was in the right place when it came back off the post. After over 200 appearances, finally a first senior goal for the centre-half, who admitted he hadn't really thought about a celebration. Another important contribution from Brouwers, who was the one hitting the post after the knockback from Alireza Jahanbakhsh. Brouwers departed at the break, but Heerenveen's hold on midfield didn't end. Maas was critical of how his side ceded the advantage in that area, saying his midfielders were all out of position far too often. Heerenveen didn't sit back on the lead either, pushing for a third to finish things off. Espen van Eyck nearly found it. More good work from Willem II's French keeper, saving them from further punishment, as Niculescu was just edged out, trying to follow up. The Abelenster Stadium was properly jumping by this point. And more reward came shortly afterwards for Ilyas Sabawi, Heerenveen's winger, on loan from Feyenoord. His shot deflected off the leg of a defender, and this time it left the keeper stranded. The 4th goal for the Moroccan, and effectively game over, given their opponents had barely threatened at the other end. The game against Ajax on the horizon, Maas has to find a way to stop the rot, and quickly. Hope might lie in the fact they play the 3 sides directly above them in their final 4 games, as long as they are still in touch by that point. there was a consolation here with 15 minutes to go, when substitute Emilio Queira did well to set up Jesse Bosch. 5 goals makes it his joint best season in that regard, but it was of scant consolation here as they slipped to a 6th straight defeat. Just the 4th that they've scored in that time. Heerenveen, for once, failing to defend the edge of their box effectively enough. The difference between how easy Heerenveen found it to create chances and how difficult it had been for Willem II was something else that Mas pointed to afterwards. He said they'd stopped winning the kind of second balls and the duels in the box that they did in the first half of the season. They were fortunate not to concede again with the home side's last decent chance of the game forged by a good run from Van A. Colat producing another good cross, nobody making the run he was hoping for. Mas's attempts to adjust his side didn't pay off, but they could have made the scoreline look more respectable than accurate in stoppage time. Yusuf Silla missing the best chance of the game for them. He remains without a goal since joining on loan from Belgian side Sporting Charleroi in January. So Veldman got his first win in charge in his first home game, and they finished the weekend in 8th. Next comes a visit to Sparta Rotterdam. Willem II are 5 points clear of the bottom 2, who go down automatically, but they're still 6 points from getting out of trouble themselves. Feyenoord had won their last 6 meetings with RZ and arrived in Alkmaar on a 3-match winning run, but Troy Parrott had the chance to put them to the sword early. His finish not good enough to beat Timon Vellenreuter, much to his coach Martin Martin's frustration. The hosts had drawn their last 3 and were without a league win since the 23rd of February. That came close through Per Koopmeiner's corner. Vellenreuter this time reacting angrily to being bundled over by Ernest Porku. A tussle which might well have led to the goal being ruled out, had it actually gone in. RZ was 6th after a disappointing 2-2 draw in midweek against second bottom RKC. That left them 7 points behind their opponents, who began in 3rd. A victory would keep open the race for that final Champions League qualifying spot, which also includes Utrecht. And they had an enjoyable first 20 minutes, mixing up the approach but catching Feyenoord out regularly. Porku denied by this. Great challenge from David Hanske, who'd expected his keeper to come and get it. At the other end, Jeroen Zoet replaced the injured Rome Jaden Owusu-Adoro, making his 6th appearance for RZ, but he chose the wrong option here, playing Bruno Martins Indi into trouble. They got away with it, but wouldn't be so lucky soon after, when they conceded the advantage in even more calamitous circumstances. This time the focus was on Zico Burmeister, who almost lost the ball to Ayase Ueda first up here, before he then headed the resulting cross past his own goalkeeper. Igor Pasha with the ball in, a whole passage of play that the young midfielder would rather forget. RZ had 60% possession in the first half, a rare thing against Feyenoord, but they also had nothing to show for it. The reality is that this moment apart, they really should have done. There were moments in the second half too when things didn't quite fall their way. The luck was definitely with the visitors here, as Parrott was played in by Christian Belic. Vellenreuter doing just enough, and his reactions were then swift too. While RZ were aiming for 3rd, Feyenoord still had designs on 2nd place, and they'd close to within 2 points of PSV if they held on to the lead, or extended it, as Anis Hajmusa thought he'd done, only to see the offside flag go up. Not against him, but Ueda, who'd made the initial dart forward. When that happened, Hajmusa had been offside too, but not actively involved. And there was nothing wrong with the next exchange that saw the winger put the ball in. However tight it was, the Japanese forward had gone a fraction early, but his foot was the problem. So Jeroen Manschot confirmed the on-field decision. The game continued to swing one way and the other, with Arced still pressing. Victory or even a point would allow them to also keep up with FC Twente, their other closest challenger for an automatic European place. However, the continuing battle between Paris and Wellenreuter was still being won by Feyenoord's German keeper, who patrolled his area well. Like their opponents, Feyenoord also had a catch-up match in midweek, which they won 4-1 at home to Groningen. Midfielder Rami Saruki made his comeback as a sub in that after more than 2 months on the sidelines, and he set up their third goal for Paschal. The Algerian was given another late run out here, but he showed he's not quite up to speed with that wild late challenge on Max Merdink, which earned him a yellow card. Feyenoord had the ball in the net again with 10 minutes to go, but again, it didn't count. This time due to a foul by Julian Carranza, who went on to score what he thought was his 5th Eredivisie goal. Instead, the Argentine was punished for a push in the back on Martin Zindi, which gave him the room he needed to finish. Not immediately though, and Walter Hulse was punished for his reaction. A protest too far and too aggressive for the referee's liking. But eventually, the official was called over to the pitch-side monitor to look at these replays of the incident for himself. Robin van Persie clearly felt there was nothing wrong, and the contact hadn't been anywhere near enough, in his opinion, to knock over Martin Zindi. However, ultimately his view didn't count, and the referee shared Arced's concerns, ruling it out for a foul. So, with the game still close in stoppage time, fresh instructions arrived for court miners to try and help Arced pull level. Whatever they were, it didn't quite work, although Jadon Adai did cause trouble late on, and almost caught Wellenreuter out with something of a disguised shot. But Feyenoord just did enough without performing particularly strongly. Their third straight win here, the first time they'd done that since 2003, on a day to forget for Burmeister and AZ. They have one more game away at Heracles to try rediscover form before the Dutch Cup final against Go Ahead Eagles. Next for Feyenoord, a visit to Fortuna Sittard. FC Twente sported a special kit for this game to mark the 700th anniversary of their home Enschede being granted city status in 1325. Shirts which are now being auctioned for charity. But it wasn't long before referee Yannick van der Laan had to stop the game as Michel Flapp had forgotten to remove a necklace. Maybe giving it to substitute Ricky van Wolfswinkel, though, was a mistake. Fortunately for Flapp, it did make it back to the dressing room. A win for Twente would see them move clear of Arced and put them back on track after defeats in the last two to Feyenoord and in the derby with Heracles. Feyenoord had been the first to beat them here in the league since Utrecht in February of last year, but it was a largely uneventful first half, with Fortuna's key players like striker Kai Sierhuis marked pretty tightly. At the other end, Twente's attacking players didn't often spark either. With Van Wolfswinkel not yet fit enough to start and Sam Lammers still missing, Nazi Unuvar started up front. And there was a recall for Saif Al-Lateef on the wing, who had their shot here. Those two were their best performers in the first period. They'd won the last 5 against Fortuna, who themselves came into this having lost 2 in a row. But finding opportunities from open play wasn't easy against a side who set themselves up to be hard to beat and then looked to hit on the break. Inevitably, the league's top scorer, Sem Stein, was involved with an acrobatic effort. He's looking to become just the second player from Twente to win the Eredivisie's Golden Boot, after Dick van Dijk in 1969. He got the chance for a 23rd goal when his side were awarded a penalty midway through the half. There was no appeal on the pitch when Gustav Lagerbielke's header flicked off an arm on its way to goal, and their coach, Joseph Osting, hadn't spotted it either. But the VAR did, and soon he was asking van der Laan to come and take a look. It was a subtle deflection off the forearm of Ivo Pinto, one which didn't do too much to change the direction of the ball, but it did prove enough for the referee to award a penalty, as the captain's arm was raised. Fortuna's coach, Danny Baus, chose to be impassive rather than impassioned. Stein took on the job and made it 7 goals in his last 8 games. A close one with Matthijs Brandenhorst guessing right, but a deserved lead on the balance of play. A harsh one as far as the visitors were concerned. Baus said the referee not awarding a penalty in real time hardly constituted a clear and obvious error, which a VAR needed to correct. It wasn't the spectacle that the fans had been hoping for, with both sides cancelling each other out, but the second half did begin with something of a flourish by the hosts. Stein playing in Univa, who was starting in the league for just the second time. This the first of 3 decent second half chances, with which he could have ensured Twente were comfortable. He also set up Stein himself with this good run, although he was nominally playing up front, his usual position has been as a number 10 or wide. Stein choosing not to take it on straight away meant he then ran out of room. And Sean Adewoye got the better of him in the box with a well-timed challenge. Fortuna had managed only 7 goals in their 10 games so far this year, and Baus made a double switch midway through the second period to try and change that, bringing on midfielder Alan Halilovic and striker Bojan Radulovic for Sierhuis and Christopher Pedersen. Halilovic was their chief creator in the first half of the season, but a loss of form saw him lose his starting spot. The Croatian nearly had an immediate impact though, with a teasing ball which set up Makan Aiko, but the French winger could only steer his effort over. That was as good as it got before stoppage time, where Fortuna sprang a late surprise to snatch an unlikely point. One of their neatest moves of the match created the opportunity as Ezekiel Pulada and Luka Tunic combined. Radulovic almost made the most of it, but for a sliding Bazkaupas. However, the resulting corner did prove productive. Tunic's delivery met with a thumping header from Rodrigo Huth, and the Brazilian earned them a point. An outcome met with a stony face from Osting, whose side had looked set to close the gap on 4th place to 4 points. Instead, it's now 1 win in 5, having once again not done enough with their possession to secure victory. Baus by far the happier despite his misgivings over VAR. However, there was still a blow to come for them as Halilovic injured his foot, chasing down this late long ball. And challenging, he actually caught Lagerbielke, but came off far worse himself. What the home players and the fans thought initially was him trying to run the clock down, Baus revealed afterwards was potentially a broken foot. He looks likely to miss their game with Feyenoord in any case, while Twente go to Pek Zwolle, hoping to turn the corner. The point meant Fortuna stayed in 9th. The last month's been one to forget for the home side, who need to rediscover form in order to continue their push for European football next season. Groningen had lost 10 of their last 11 Eredivisie games with PSV, but they won the most recent one here in October 2022. Since then, though, PSV had beaten them 6-0 later that season and won 5-0 in Eindhoven in November. So when they scored early through the returning Malik Tillman, Groningen would have been forgiven for fearing the worst. This was the US midfielder's first start in almost 3 months, and it couldn't have been set up better for him. The perfect layoff from Ismail Zaibari. His coach, Peter Bos, admitted afterwards the side had missed his influence during their slump at the start of the year. They looked to be back from that, but the damage is done. Their 6-point lead at the winter break eroded by Ajax, who now had a 9-point advantage. It wasn't all plain sailing either, as Ivan Perisic's header inadvertently set up a chance for Tom van Bergen. One that he couldn't take, but it did serve as a warning for PSV at the back. Despite the 26-point gap between the sides, the Northerners came into this with confidence on an 8-match unbeaten run at home. which had helped lift them away from the relegation zone, and they continue to have their moments. This from Luciano Valente. He and Dave Clarkman, who's on loan from Arsède, have been two of the key attacking players for Dick Lukien since the turn of the year. But it was PSV that struck next, and only just over 30 seconds after that, Groningen chance at the other end. Created by Noah Lang, and then Richie Ledesma. He was headed in by Perisic. His 10th goal for the club in all competitions. A 4th in the last 6 games for club and country too. He showed how quickly a game can change. The Jordborg hasn't seen many goals this season, fewer than anywhere else in fact, and this was only the 9th that an opposing side has managed to score here. But the tally for the game moved up to 3 goals when Valente picked out Clarkman soon afterwards, and he produced a very impressive finish. Just his 2nd senior goal, and both have come for Groningen since his January loan move. A 6th assist too for the Dutch under-21 international Valente. As a result of that, they finished the half on the up and had one more go at pulling level before the break. A neat set-up after Marco Rente's cross saw Staya Racing have a go from distance. It may not have gone in, but it did lead to problems for PSV in another area. Keeper Walter Benitez injured himself in the process of turning the ball over and had to be replaced at half-time. His backup, Joel Drommel, had started all 4 cup games this season, as well as their Champions League opener, but this was his first Eredivisie appearance since May of last year. Lukien made a change too at the break, bringing on striker Brynjolfur Willemsen for Mats Sørensen, but it was Valente who continued to grab the limelight, coming close after a long-busting run from Racing, who progressed a long way unchallenged. Valente's last goal was the winner in the Derby of the North here against Heerenveen in January. Further changes followed for both sides. Ledesma's injury meant that Boss turned to his bench and brought on Tyrell Malacia, at the same time as some fresh legs up front in the shape of Johan Bakayoko and Kuheb Drielich. Finn Stam and the experienced Leandro Bacuna joined the action for Groningen. It had been a quiet night for Luc de Jong so far, but with a little over 15 minutes to go, the captain found the net after this quick break. His shot wrong-footing keeper Etienne Vassen via a deflection off defender Marvin Peersman. Goal number 17 of the season and a 13th in the league. Or so he thought. The replay suggested there was a hint of offside as he ran through, and further examination from the VAR proved it. So referee Bas Nijhuis ruled the goal out and Groningen was still alive. A game watched very keenly by Ajax fans as well as those PSV supporters who couldn't get an away ticket. They would have been willing Bacuna to find the corner with his best chance from a promising free kick. Close, but he didn't quite manage it, and his last goal remains the equaliser away at Almere City in late August. De Jong's luck didn't improve in the closing stages either, and even from 6 yards out he failed to hit the target, prodding wide when he seemed certain to score and make the last few minutes a little more comfortable. Instead, Bakayoko did that, with a successful finish from a very similar position soon afterwards, and from a similar move. Belgium's first goal in 2 months, set up by Saibari's flicker. An 11th of the campaign in all competitions, 3 behind last season's total, although he hasn't quite been as productive in the league this time around. Drielich, the man providing the cross. The win restored PSV's 5-point advantage over Feyenoord and restored a smile to their coach's face too. A good response after last week's defeat at home to Ajax, which more or less ruled them out of the title race. They closed the gap on the leaders, who were playing 24 hours later. A first home defeat since October for Groningen, who'd gone 3 games now without a win. They ended the weekend 11th, 8 clear of danger for now. The Eridivisie's bottom side, Almere City, had picked up over the preceding 7 games, winning 2, drawing 2 and losing narrowly to 3 of the top 5, Ajax, Feyenoord and FC Twente. Here they faced a PEC Zwolle team with a 6-point advantage over the relegation zone, but they didn't yet consider themselves safe. Dylan Venter's neat turn set up the visitors' first chance, one the striker scuffed wide. The Almere City coach, Jeroen Rijsdijk, took over with them in danger of being cut adrift. Not many gave them hope, but a win here and they'd be just 3 points behind Willem II in the relegation playoff place, Charles Brim with their first chance. Despite the early opportunities, it took until midway through the first period for the first goal. A neat move from start to finish. It was a 1-2 between Philippe Krastev and Anwar El Azouzi, which cut the whole side open. And on his 50th Eredivisie appearance, El Azouzi could finally celebrate a first top-flight goal. Also, his first for the club, although he didn't seem to want people talking about it. But more concerned for their opponents, it was the 51st that they had conceded so far. Only RKC, just above them, had let in more. And that continued to undermine their survival hopes. They're also the league's lowest scorers with 18 goals at this point, so falling 2-0 down was a real concern. Venter, the man who took a chance, and saw his shot loop in via a deflection off Ricardo Visos. An unfortunate moment in many aspects. It probably would have been saved if the Spanish defender had not done his utmost to get back off the floor and try and block it. Instead, it went down as a 13th goal for Venter, an impressive tally, playing for a side like PEC Zwolle. One more than Luc de Jong has for PSV in the Eredivisie. With only 4 wins all season and 17 defeats so far, this was looking like a hard game to salvage for the hosts, but they carried on pressing. And when Zwolle coughed up possession, their best chance arrived as a result. Cornelius Hansen taking it on, but finding Jasper Schendelaar too big to bypass. Hansen was responsible for both of their opportunities in the closing stages of the half, which sent them in at the break perhaps a little more optimistic. They both owed much to tenacity, particularly from Brim, whose pressing helped to create the first, and now his link-up play enabled the second, which came via a cross from Vasilios Sagaritis. Hansen this time stooping to head goalwards, only for Schendelaar to deny him again. The Norwegian has just 2 goals this season, his last coming on the 10th of November. And only Brim has had more than that, managing 3, which is one major reason for their current position. Alongside him up front, Junior Cadil has proved a difficult opponent with his pace on the wing, but the Frenchman has also blown hot and cold. And last season's top scorer, Thomas Robinet, who hit 11, has only 1 this time around. They continued to give it a good go, but Zwolle looked well able to hold them at arm's length. Neither Cadil nor Tom Hay able to make a difference here. Hay then proceeded to lose the ball in a risky position, trying to be a little too fancy, which allowed Jamiro Montero to advance and potentially kill the game off. Nordebaka to the rescue, Almere's keeper saving well from the experienced midfielder. In the end, it took a substitution to change the game for the home side. Baptiste Guillaume, who joined in the summer from French second-tier Guingamp, came on for Brim. Iraqi international Ali Jassim, who's on loan from Como, replaced Hansen. And the impact was almost immediate. Just over a minute later, a cross from Damil Dankelau evaded Guillaume in the middle, but it did find its way to Jassim, who fired in his first goal for the club. And that immediately reignited hope with a quarter of normal time still to go. Their 19th goal of the season, although that's still 4 fewer than the Eredivisie's top scorer, Sam Stein, has on his own. But less than 4 minutes later, some concerted pressure from a corner led to the ball being forced home again. Zwolle simply could not get it properly cleared. And eventually, Robinet's cross was nodded down by James Lawrence and turned in by Cadil. It had been Lawrence's late own goal which decided the first game between these two back in September. So now the Welshman had a measure of redemption with his first assist for the club, his first in senior Dutch football too. With the Unmar Stadium now jumping again, attention turned to finding a winning goal for Zwolle too, who already thought they'd done enough for that. Anselmo Garcia McNulty had another go here, and he wasn't far away from his second goal of the campaign. He did well to escape the clutches of the home defence because they kept Zwolle tightly wrapped up the next time there was a corner at this end. But that resulted in El Azuzi and Zagaritis having to be separated by teammates. It took a while though, and they looked properly stuck together. But eventually players on both sides succeeded, and the referee, Joey Coy, could have a quick word. No yellow cards, just a final warning. The game fizzled out after that, with both sides having to accept a point. It didn't do either many favours. Zwolle weren't happy having thrown away a 2-goal lead. They now face a tough couple of games with Twente and Feyenoord. Almere City didn't climb much closer to safety, but they did edge a point above RKC, with games against PSV and Heerenveen to come. The chance was now there for RKC to win and put themselves in a much better position. RKC and Heracles were in similar positions to Almere City and PEC Zwolle. RKC having the greater need for points, but it still took over half an hour for them to threaten via captain Oscar Zavada. Fabian de Kaiser coming out on top. The Heracles keeper was also well positioned soon after, when Moa Hatteren took aim. This proved a rare effort on target in the first half, which failed to properly spark into life. The Heracles coach, Owen van der Looy, was critical of his side's performance in both halves, but particularly the second. He sensed in the build-up the last week's derby win over Twente had been a relief, a kind of relaxing element, and perhaps they were now safe, but he wasn't going to say that just yet. It was something he strongly disagreed with, though. Whatever reason, they didn't manage to hit their stride. These kind of mistakes crept in, Daniel van Kaam fluffing a very presentable chance on his first start since the end of January. That was nothing though, compared to the kind of miss that was to come early in the second half. One which could yet prove costly for RKC in their battle to stay up. The gap to safety at this stage was 12 points, and so, like for Almere City, the relegation playoff place represents their only real chance of survival. Heracles were just above the bottom three not so long ago, but now had a hard-won 7-point cushion. Although their coach would clearly like them to keep that same hunger right up to the end of the season. His players were certainly battling, Ivan Mesic perhaps a little too much. Although the Slovakian defender escaped a card for a kick-out at a Hatteren. The miss of the round and one of the misses of the season arrived shortly afterwards from a well-constructed move which saw them win the ball back and use it decisively. Tim van der Loo provided the cross, and all Zavada had to do was tap it into an unguarded net. Instead, he somehow directed it back across goal and over. A remarkable miss, however you look at it. According to Opta's data, it was a chance with an XG of 0.97. So one which would be scored 97 times out of 100. He had a productive spell between November and the beginning of February with 9 goals, but he hasn't scored since. And RKC haven't won since his double helped them to a 5-0 success over Nat Breda. It was certainly competitive, but without the necessary quality from either side. There wasn't much room or time in midfield with tackles flying in, and Mesic got a taste of his own medicine when Richard Elmargaret landed on his foot, leading to a yellow for him. Later on, Zavada returned the favour to van der Loo with a lock back from the far post, but this was hardly the same calibre of chance, and the youngsters' acrobatic effort didn't trouble the Heracles goalkeeper. They did, however, engineer a very familiar-looking chance 90 seconds later, one that was strikingly similar to Zavada's. This time it didn't come off due to very alert defending. Chris Locase's cross turned behind by Janis Vikov in the nick of time, just before Margaret got there. The introduction of Michael Kramer and Richard van der Ven came with around 20 minutes to go. Savada and Margaret making way. But no real further chances came their way. It was Herakles that might well have snatched it late on. Shem Skerperman's header just a fraction high. Lekesa had added little bar that one cross, and when he fluffed the game's final chance, it was all but over. They have a tough-looking run in too, playing 4 of the top 8 as well as Groningen and their next opponents, NAC. Herakles, Havazet, Feyenoord and PSV all still to come, but they could also do RKC a favour when they face Willem II. Henk Fraser, the RKC coach, has remained confident in public at least, but time is running out. Van der Looy is already set to leave in the summer, but he should do so with his side still in the Eredivisie. Having seen Feyenoord open up a 4-point lead in the battle for third, Utrecht travelled to Deventer to take on the high-flying go-ahead Eagles. Sitting 7th with a 10-point advantage over Heerenveen in 8th, the home side were comfortably in the Conference League playoff picture, and also have the chance for Europa League qualification if they win the Dutch Cup. They took the lead when Victor Edvardsen was left unmarked to tap home from 6 yards out, earning him a 9th goal and Oliver Antman the 13th assist of his standout season. Both players have continued to thrive since the club sold Oliver Edvardsen to Ajax in January. And even without the man who was their standout player from the first half of the season, they appear to have gone from strength to strength. Antman's 14th assist wasn't long in coming either. Just 3 minutes later, he laid the ball off here on the edge of the box for Mati Sure to dispatch. The Belgian had little impact in the first half of the season as a sub, but he's now started the last 8 games and is certainly looking the part. It's turning into quite the campaign for coach Paul Simonis, who stepped up from his role as assistant in the summer when René Hake left for Manchester United. A good darting run from Antman this time providing the catalyst. Well timed too, and he held it up just as well as their target man Edvardsen could have done, leading to a second goal for Sure. They should have made it 3-0 midway through the first half before Utrecht managed to get their act together defensively. Edvardsen, the instigator, playing in Milan Smit, who'd scored in 2 of his last 3 games. An important save from Vasilis Barkas. The big Greek keeper also swatted the next effort away from Sure, keeping his side just about in touch in what was an uncharacteristically sluggish display from a team that had been so good on their travels. They'd already become the first club outside the traditional Big Three to go an entire year unbeaten away from home in the Eredivisie. But they, AZ and Twente, do seem to be dropping points at key times of the season. And despite their own defeat at Feyenoord last week, the Eagles were right on it in this. Their quick combinations proving too much for the visitors. This fast break came to nothing, but they did get a free kick when Edvardsen was tripped by Zidane Iqbal as he surged forward. An incident spotted by the referee who initially played advantage. Dean James took it on, fresh from his international debut for Indonesia. By that point, Utrecht coach Ron Jans had seen enough and was decisive enough to change it, bringing on Oscar Fraulo in midfield and Kolbein Vincent at left back. Soufiane El Karouani and Alonso Engranda were withdrawn. El Karouani, in particular, showcasing his displeasure. However, the boss was proved right as his side recovered, and they themselves scored twice in quick succession at the end of the first half, something which had appeared improbable just minutes before. Johan Katlin started the comeback with this shot, which bounced awkwardly just in front of keeper Jari de Busse. A first goal of the year, and a 5th of the season in all for the Frenchman. Less than 2 minutes later, they were at it again to go in at the break all square. This time, Iqbal's shot was diverted deftly into the path of Miguel Rodriguez by Sebastian Haller to give the winger his second in as many games. Before last week, he too hadn't scored this year, having also missed 2 months of it with a groin injury. 2-2 was an unlikely half-time score, but something of a pleasant surprise for the away fans. And probably Jans too, who can't have expected his changes to have had such a swift, galvanising effect. Despite that short period in the ascendancy, the game didn't change complexion in the second half, and the hosts were still on top, although not quite as convincingly at the start. However, they did suffer a blow on the hour, losing James to injury after a nasty-looking slip. He got a push in the back from another Utrecht substitute, David Min, who just replaced Haller. And with the cup final just 2 weeks away, he now faces a race against time to be fit. Asger Adelgaard was his replacement, but there were no further changes after that for the hosts. For Simonis, this game elicited a similar feeling to the one in Utrecht, where they'd led 3-1 until the 88th minute, only for Adrian Blake to score twice and snatch a 3-3 draw. It was a more combative second half, but with fewer clear-cut chances. Fraulo had that, which faded away. And at the other end, Antman looked like he might have his moment with a goal from a cross which went all the way from one side to the other, only for Finson to throw himself in the way. Utrecht's ability to readjust in-game and to come back from difficult-looking positions has been a feature of Jantz's time in charge. But wins are what they need now if they want to secure an automatic European place and not risk the lottery of the playoffs. They might not even have got a point had Surrey's been a fraction lower with the game's last real opportunity. Another good incursion from Antman, who laid the groundwork for the Belgian to take aim. An entertaining contest, one the visitors were happy with. In fact, they were glad to get out of this with the points, a compliment to the Eagles. A visit to NAC Raiders next for them, and then the cup final with AZ in Rotterdam. Utrecht will host Groningen. Sparta and NAC sat 2 points apart in lower mid-table, both not yet safe, but both also in the mix for a top-half finish. This was Vito van Kooij's first return to the club. He left in the summer of 2023 for an adventure in Saudi Arabia, and it wasn't a happy one. Referee Robin Henskens had little choice but to book him for this, stopping a counter-attack with a foul on Patrick van Aanholt. The sides drew 1-1 in Nijmegen in December, and 6 of the last 9 meetings had also ended in a draw. The hosts had the better of the first half chances, Mike Erdhausen coming close to his first goal of the season. Sparta had won their last 2 and put together a 5-match unbeaten run to move decisively away from their previous position in the middle of a relegation battle. Shunsuke Mito scored twice in last week's win over Fortuna Sittard and also had a good effort here. The Japanese winger enjoyed tormenting the NAC back line, which had conceded 3 times last week in their draw with AZ. Their run of 1 win in 8 had seen them drop from a position on the cusp of the European playoffs. Given the way the first half was going, it seemed inevitable Mito would be involved in a goal. And so it proved, as he conjured up the cross from which Sparta made it 1-0. Christian Hlinsen's header came back off the post and then hit the unfortunate keeper, Robin Roofs, and went in. The Icelander got the plaudits, but it went down as an own goal from the NAC keeper. The aim of Hlinsen's loan from Ajax has been to get regular football after injury, and that has happened, although he only has 1 goal to his name so far. In a creative midfield alongside other loanees, Karl Eiting and Giva Ezekiel, he clearly enjoyed pulling the strings, with Mito and Mitchell van Bergen using their pace to trouble NAC out wide. And with a target man like Tobias Lauritsen, there were lots of crosses for the visitors to defend. Van Bergen, though, unfortunately didn't last longer than 40 minutes, having picked up a knock in this move. He was soon being replaced by Joel Idaho. NSA coach Roy Yamaya also looked to his bench at the break, bringing on Kento Shiogai up front for Brian Linson, who'd had little service. And they might have pulled level within 3 minutes of the restart, creating this excellent chance for Tom Oyan. They tried to be just a little too adventurous. The hosts understandably looked the more confident on the ball given their recent renaissance. Joshua Kitolano had been on the field only a matter of seconds when he took aim after this attractive move. But it's over a year since the Norwegian midfielder last found the net. Linson clearly isn't short on confidence given he chose to go for goal here. It nearly paid off. Roos looked like he probably had it covered, but the crossbar helped him out too. Van Aanholt might have been inspired by that to try his own long-range curler. He's yet to score since joining as a free agent late last year after leaving Galatasaray. He won the title on loan with PSV last season, and at 34 he still has plenty to offer. Despite scoring 6 times in their previous 3 games, NSA offered little threat in this, and their chances weren't improved by losing Fonkoy to a second yellow card. A risky decision to make this kind of challenge when he'd already been booked. He scored 14 times in his final season here as Sparta reached the European playoff final and became a real fan favourite. Here, though, they were happy to wave him off. NSA completed their search for a new coach in the lead-up to this, naming former PEC Zwolle boss Dick Schröder as the man who'll take over in the summer. He left Spanish side Castellón in January. Improving their defence will be one of the main jobs. Their 40 goals is more than anyone outside the top 7, but they've conceded 42. Meyer's men had no choice but to risk it now, though. Sontje Hansen with that chance. And they kept the pressure on from the resulting corner as Shogai nodded across for Mees Hoedemakers. But a chance at one end led to a breakaway at the other. Hansen's cross was well defended, and before long Ezekiel was racing away to set up Sparta's second. The first goal for the club too for Nurki Thoresen, the Icelandic striker who joined them on loan from MLS side St. Louis City in January. Using Bram Nautink as a screen, he arrowed one inside the near post instead. 2-0 to Sparta when it could conceivably have been 1-1 just moments before. And it shows just how tight things are in mid-table. But Sparta, a side who were in the bottom 3 not long ago, are now closer to the European playoffs than the relegation ones. A third straight clean sheet for them too. The mood's much happier as they head into the final 6 games, although coach Maurice Stein said he'd still settle for 15th place in survival. They leapfrogged their opponents to go 12th. NSA are 13th and a point behind. Leaders Ajax close out this week's programme against NAC Breda, one of just 2 sides to beat them in the Eredivisie this season along with RZ. That happened in week 2 and gave the newly promoted side belief to cause a few other upsets in the first half of the campaign. With Brian Brobby suspended, 18-year-old Don Angelo Conadu made his full Eredivisie debut for the home side. NAC came to Amsterdam on a 9-match winless run, but they had drawn 3 of the last 4. And they made a confident start, competing well in the early duels and scoring with only 8 minutes on the clock. An advantage after a foul by Ahmetcan Kaplan on Elias Olmarsson also played into their hands. And it was a big moment for another teenager, Leo Zauer. The 19-year-old is on loan from Feyenoord and had already scored away at PSV. Here, he added another notable strike to his list, cutting in to blast into the corner. They'd also scored first when the sides met in Breda, although that was in the second half. A 6th of the season, it gave rise to real hope of just a second win this year and a chance to move up from their position just above the bottom 3. Kaplan had been another surprise start of Ajax, this being only his 2nd of the year in the league. While at the other end, NAC coach Karl Hofkens had dropped regular keeper Daniel Bielica and handed Roy Kortsmit his first Eredivisie appearance since January 2018, when he was at Sparta. His first action came here on 15 minutes, turning away a deflected cross from Jonel Harper. However, the 32-year-old keeper hadn't made a competitive appearance in over a year, and perhaps that showed when he tried to be too clever getting away from Konadu before wrestling him over in a move that was more reminiscent of judo than football. Davy Klaassen seemed to think the yellow card had gone to Ajax's striker rather than Kortsmit. Put in the side for his distribution and ability to play out better than Bielitsa, according to his coach. Hofkins defended his performance afterwards. Once the aftermath of the decision had died down, up stepped Kenneth Taylor to slot his side level. A gift of a penalty. It might have been just what they needed after a sluggish start. They certainly improved from that point on, and Konadu also had a big part to play in their second goal. Firstly, keeping a hold of the ball well, and then fielding a return pass from Taylor under pressure before setting up Steven Berghuis. Just a second league goal this season for the midfielder, his only other coming in the first game of the year against RKC. Surprisingly, just a third in all competitions. With only 3 league assists to add to that, it's been a far from productive year, but he's still been hugely important in how Ajax play. Just before the hour, Francesco Farioli was able to welcome back 2 players after 2 months out injured, Joti Mokio and Wout Weghorst. Bertrand Traoré and Konadu were the ones coming off. Although they were still in control, 2-1 wasn't a comfortable scoreline for Ajax. Third goal proved elusive for now. Josip Sutalo had a go at finding one. His effort was deflected over the top by Max Ballard. It was that same Australian midfielder that won the ball cleanly away from Mokio to start a counter-attack. And one which could easily have ended with a second goal for the visitors. It was 4-on-4, and while showing Zawa on the outside, Lucas Rosa also gave him a good side of goal. Ajax drew on further subs, the fit again Christian Rasmussen, as well as Oliver Edvardsen, who played his part in their third. Mokio started and finished the move, pinging the ball out to the winger, who then linked up with Taylor. And Mokio had continued to charge forward, getting on the end of the cross for his first Eredivisie goal. First home goal too for the youngster. His only other came away in the Europa League at Union Saint-Gilloise in Belgium. It now seemed certain that the 9-point lead over PSV would be restored, and they could easily have scored again after this too. The Ajax fans were certainly in the mood now, and so too was Taylor. It was his inch-perfect ball that found Edvardsen, but they had to settle for 3. They're unbeaten in 13 Eredivisie games now, winning all but one of those, and they've taken 31 from a possible 33 points in 2025. They can't match PSV's record points tally this century of 91, which they set last year, but they could equal their own best effort since 2000 of 88 points, although only if they win all 6 remaining league matches, starting with the visit to Willem II this coming weekend. So the top 3 all won, while Utrecht, AZ and Twente drop points. Draws for RKC and Almere City at the other end mean it is as you were at the bottom, but both crept a point closer to Willem II in the relegation playoff place, and it was another good week for both Sparta and Heerenveen. Ajax need a maximum 10 more points now to confirm the title if PSV win all their remaining games. The race for second and third is well alive, and it's still tight in the bottom half. That's all for now. We're back next week. Until then, from me, Jonathan Beck, it's goodbye.